Hello, everyone. We just passed the spring equinox, which also means from a tropical astrology place, we moved from the sun being in Pisces season, to the sun being in Aries. This marks a really big shift in energy. In modern astrology, we view Aries as the first sign of the zodiac and Pisces as this is the 12th. So when we hit this spring equinox point, we're essentially starting over, going back to the beginning, starting a brand new yearly cycle of the zodiac. So the energy between Pisces and Aries is very different because it's not just moving between two zodiac signs or even moving between two seasons. It's really kicking off a whole new zodiac cycle, a whole new year, so to speak. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what that energy will look like, um, what the Aries energy looks like in general, especially contrasting it with the Pisces energy we've been experiencing a lot over the past month. And then also talk about what is specific to this Aries season. We do have some eclipses, for example, coming up. So I'll be talking about that too. And if you do like any of my content, my website is Magic of the Moon Astrology, all one word.com. And I do have periodic blog posts there and links to events, some of which are in person in Seattle and some of which are online and available to anyone. So, first of all, from a seasonal perspective, the sun moving into Aries, it correlates with the spring equinox. From a modern astrology, Western astrology perspective, we actually define the beginning of Aries to be the spring equinox. That is what we take as the beginning of our Aries season. And we can see that it feels like a time of new beginnings. In the Northern Hemisphere, we see buds popping out on trees, very early flowers like crocuses coming out of the earth. Maybe we start feeling breezes that feel warmer, feel more like spring instead of cold and wintry. And with the start of the spring, with the coming of the spring equinox, day and night now have equal portions of our 24-hour total diurnal day. With light and dark having equal measures, now the light will start to grow each day. So the light is sort of gaining power over the darkness as we go forward. So Aries, astrologically, in medical astrology, it's associated with the head, and Pisces is associated with the feet. So there really is this concept of we've kind of made it all the way down the zodiac body, and we're starting back up again at the head. And we see a lot of head um, imagery in Aries season. For example, um, with all of the blooms and pollen and everything in the air, I got kind of a small head cold. And again, it's an Aries ailment. You know, when the sun was in Pisces, maybe we had more wet feet because we were walking through water or snow. We were very oriented downwards. But now with Aries season, yeah, we're getting into the season of sinus problems and head colds and stuffy noses. And so there's a lot happening up in the head. And Aries also is a fire sign. It's ruled by Mars. So we kind of see the irritation of the head, the irritation of the nasal passages or the throat. Or so many people right now are suffering from sinus headaches. So again, we can see kind of that shift from the Pisces cold, wet feet to the Aries kind of more hot, irritated head. Um, and whenever we think of the beginning of a new cycle, we need that spark to get going, to get moving, to start something new. And Pisces, in a lot of ways, kind of symbolizes a death, and Aries symbolizes the rebirth. Pisces ending out the cycle and Aries starting the next cycle. And Pisces also sort of represents that cosmic womb from which we all came. That floaty oneness of energy, where the child is not separate from the mother yet. They're still very interrelated. The child is still safe, secure, getting all of the nutrients it needs from the mother. And that empathetic intuitiveness of Pisces, that wateriness of emotions, really does kind of symbolize that cosmic womb. And then at some point during a pregnancy, the baby basically decides it is time. And the baby comes out of the birth canal into the world as a fully separate, autonomous being. And this really is that energy between Pisces and Aries. Aries provides that spark, that motivation to say, okay, this, womb, this empathy, this support I have, it's amazing, but I'm ready to go out and make my own mark in the world. And that really is Aries. Um, and one thing to keep in mind always during Aries season, um, Aries is a fire sign, but it is a cardinal fire sign, meaning that it's great at initiating, getting things moving, getting them unstuck, but is typically not good at sustaining. So, Aries season is also the time when we might start a lot of projects, feel that Aries need to start, but may disperse our energies and efforts so much that we either can't finish most of what we start, or we wind up kind of burned out and exhausted by the end of Aries season trying to finish everything. And it's not really a coincidence that the term burned out, it's a fire related term. And that burnout is tends to be very prevalent with Aries types. So again, conserve your energy this season. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the eclipses and other things coming specific to this season. But be conscious of what you put your energy into, and even though you may feel that urge to start many things, again, think about what you really want to invest your time and energy into. If you see your time and energy as finite quantities that need to be carefully invested, that will help a lot moving through Aries season. Um, and then, another thing to keep in mind is that even apart from the different projects that we start during Aries season, the very act of changing seasons, starting a new cycle, that requires an immense amount of energy. So even just this energetic shift from the watery Pisces time, when probably a lot of us were spending more time indoors, it felt more like hibernation mode. Now that the weather's getting nicer again in the northern hemisphere, people are more likely to be having social parties, and you'll be more likely to be getting invitations to go out and do things. So there is just more energy required of most of us, even apart from individual things we are initiating. So again, being conscious of what to say no to is really important during Aries season. Um, Okay, and so some things that are specific about this year's Aries season. First of all, yesterday Mars moved from Aquarius to Pisces. Um, we have had a huge group of planets in Pisces for the last month or so. Um, there were 4 planets in Pisces, and then the sun just moved out of Pisces into Aries. Great, now we're down to 3 planets in Pisces. But because Mars moved from Aquarius to Pisces yesterday, now we're back to 4 planets in Pisces. So typically, when we make that move between Pisces and Aries season, we feel a very dramatic shift from that, intuitive, empathetic, living in the present moment, not worrying too much about the future, kind of that all-encompassing oneness feeling. we feel a huge shift to, no, I want to differentiate myself. I want to go out and make my mark on the world. But because we have still 4 planets in Pisces, that shift is going to feel pretty ambiguous this year. We will feel the desire to start new project, get things moving, get out of our winter hibernation. But at the same time, there will be big parts of us that just want to rest, just want to feel, safe, secure, in touch with our intuition, not particularly motivated to go out and do a bunch of things. So that is going to be a tension specific to this year because we have all of those planets in Pisces. And then in addition, Aries, where the sun now is ruled, each zodiac sign has a planetary ruler. Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars just moved into Pisces yesterday. So again, there's this link we're not going to be able to get rid of between the motivation to go out and do things and not having the motivation to go out and do things. So again, just recognizing there will be kind of a push and pull where you may have a desire to move things forward in your life, but at the same time, it's like conceptually you want to move things forward, but practically you're like, oh, it's so nice just to rest, just to be in my house, just to be a little more internally focused. So that will be an energy we have to balance this year. Also, the moon nodes are currently moving through Aries and Libra. The moon nodes are always 180 degrees apart. That means we will have our eclipses in Aries and Libra this year when the sun is in Aries and Libra. So we do have 2 eclipses this Aries season, one solar eclipse, an eclipse of the sun, and one lunar eclipse, an eclipse of the moon. So on March 25th, in just a couple of days, we will have a partial lunar eclipse in Libra. When the moon is in Libra, the sun is in Aries. This partial lunar eclipse will be visible, but I've watched partial lunar eclipses. I think they're a little bit underwhelming. You watch the moon and it gets slightly darker, slightly not as bright, but it's not very stunning. So this is an eclipse you could sit out if you want to, and not feel like you need to go outside and see it. Um, and this Aries Libra axis, Aries is all about the individual, the ego, personal accomplishments, personal achievements. It really is about the strength of will of the individual. Libra, its opposite, is all about relationships and how we show up when we are with others. And so much about the eclipses this year are kind of the balance on that axis of I want to be myself. I want to be a fully developed solo individual, fully strong on my own. But then we also are social creatures. We want to be in some relationships, some friendships. We want to be in communion with other people. And what are we willing to sacrifice of ourselves and our autonomy and freedom to be in those relationships with other people? We always have to compromise on something whenever we are in any friendship or relationship. What are we willing to compromise? How much do we value our autonomy and independence and ability to do whatever we want whenever we want? Versus how much of that are we willing to sacrifice to be in close communion with other people? So that is really a theme that we will be exploring with both of these eclipses. And eclipses are also typically related to big beginnings and endings. They do mark points where the sun or the moon is kind of obscured from view. So there is this sense of a beginning and ending. And in more ancient astrology, it was actually viewed as, the sun or moon was being eaten and then essentially reborn. So again, there's that sense of beginnings and endings. So that is a partial lunar eclipse that will be, powerful. But again, it's a partial eclipse, not super close to the nodes. The stronger eclipse is going to be the solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th. And this solar eclipse will be visible across most of North America. and I think down into Mexico as well. So there's a huge swath of the US where that full total solar eclipse will be visible. This is pretty notable. Many solar eclipses happen over the 70% of the Earth that is water, where very few people get to see it. So, yes, it happens, but practically people don't see it. This one will be very visible for North America. Um, so, uh, don't look directly at it. They make special eclipse viewers that you can find online if you want to actually look at this eclipse safely. Um, but because this one is a total eclipse and because it is visible to all of us here in the Western world, this one is going to be extra, it's going to pack an extra punch. And so again, this will be along that axis of what does it look like to really be our full, authentic, free selves? How do we step into that and embody that? And are there areas we're willing to compromise on that intentionally to be in relationships with others who may be very different from us? So that is the theme to explore. And we may find that some relationships fizzle or end abruptly during this time. And then likewise, we may find ourselves drawn to new friendships, new relationships. And then I've also seen sometimes with eclipses, it's not that the relationship or friendship itself ends, but it transforms pretty drastically. So it may be, for instance, that one of you set clearer boundaries on the relationship, and the relationship effectively, as it was, dies and is reborn in a different way. So these will be this will be a really powerful season for our interactions with others and the way we understand ourselves. And Mercury goes retrograde on April 1st, April Fool's Day, which is kind of a funny coincidence, if such a thing exists. And Mercury retrogrades, they get a bad rap, but they do happen 3 times a year. So they're not a crazy unknown occurrence. Just because the solar eclipse on April 8th is happening while Mercury is retrograde, just, there's going to be so much energy. Just be a little bit more conscious to double check anything important during this time, during the month of April, when Mercury is retrograde or in its shadow. So, for example, if you have a flight booked, just double check and make sure the flight is on time. If you have a long car trip planned, make sure your car is, ready and the oil has been changed. And if you have important documents to sign, review those documents carefully to make sure you understand what you're signing. Mercury retrogrades are just a great time to double check. Often, if you double check things during a Mercury retrograde, you will find problems. And then typically the problems that do show up around a Mercury retrograde are recoverable. You might have to redo something. Your trip might be inconvenienced if your flight is delayed for 4 hours or something like that. But they are recoverable. But because we do have that solar eclipse, which often represents more final beginnings and endings happening on April 8th, it's worth double checking whatever you're doing around the time of the eclipse, because we do have that Mercury retrograde. We wouldn't want to make any big endings that we don't want to. So, good to double check with Mercury retrograde and the solar eclipse in Aries. And then last, we have Venus moving into Aries on April 5th, so just a few days before that solar eclipse. Venus is not particularly exalted in Aries. Her home isn't in Aries, but I do love the Venus in Aries season. If we think about that Aries outgoing, passionate, motivated energy and apply that to Venus, which is creativity and relationships, it really is a time for being more, if you haven't talked to a friend in a while, calling that friend, hanging out with them. It's also a time where if you've been feeling creatively kind of stuck internally, stuck in your head, Venus in Aries is really a time of more explosive creative growth and a wonderful way to get unstuck. So there will be some good creative energy here and relational energy coming right before that solar eclipse, which will be helpful, having Venus in Aries while the solar eclipse happens in Aries. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just Aries archetypally is the warrior. And for all of us during Aries season every year, but particularly this year because we have the eclipses in Aries, um, it's important to make sure we know what we're fighting for. In Aries season, again, we typically have that get things moving energy, which is incredibly helpful for getting unstuck. But sometimes that can be, if we don't have a good battle to fight or a good thing to move forward, it can kind of devolve into, picking fights with other people and kind of petty arguments. But Aries will always want to fight for something. So make sure as you go into this Aries season, you know what you believe in, you know what you want to move forward. You may not know how to get there yet. That's fine. Aries is actually great at helping to figure that part out. But at least knowing the kinds of energies you want to develop, the kinds of missions and beliefs you have that you want to move forward. That will be really helpful for getting the most out of Aries season. Without that intentionality, Aries season can sometimes just be a time of a lot of bickering and little arguments because we don't have that bigger fight in mind. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.